Welcome back. This is video 2. I'm assuming that you watched video 1, got some general announcements. It's going to be cold, so make sure that you are well prepared to come into the building whenever you're coming into the building. Um, I do need to do this real quickly. I'm sorry I'm doing this right in front of your face, but um, I have to do my daily check-in, and if I don't do it while it's fresh, there we go. Okay, sorry about that, but got to take care of business sometimes. That was quick. This video is all about the work in StudySync. So if you have not spent time in No Red Ink, make sure that all of your work is done in No Red Ink, then press pause on this video and then go back and do some No Red Ink work. Please do things in the right way. This one, though, is going to get into StudySync material, and this will be that type of video where I'm going to go through some of those answers, so you will be able to listen and then press pause, type what you need to type in No Red Ink, in StudySync, and then move on to the next one. So you'll probably be pausing and playing quite a bit throughout this video, and that's perfectly okay. So specifically what I'm talking about is inside of StudySync, you were assigned 2 days ago this first read of Amistad, and I was asking you to make sure that you read the material, understanding it is a legal document. So there's some information from John Quincy Adams, and then there was some information from one of the Supreme Court justices who wrote a closing opinion. So a little bit of legal jargon in there, but you need to understand kind of what the context is. I love this material because of the fact that um, just it's kind of a challenge to our current culture, and it's a conversation that I would like to have with a lot of you, um, because we don't get taught deep history. We get taught a lot of surface types of things, and what we need to understand about this piece is the fact that in the United States, slavery was still legal. It was still very much a part of our legal system, our process. We had not completely abolished slavery yet. That's not going to happen for several more years. So to have a ship come onto our land and full of Africans who are claiming that they were taken illegally, that case got taken all the way to the Supreme Court. Okay, and the Supreme Court upheld the values that were written in the Declaration of Independence and our early Constitution. Those values of, as humans, we have inalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And those were the bedrock principles that formed the closing argument and then ultimately allowed these Africans to be able to go back to their homeland because they were taken illegally. So there was some precedent there that I think was very important. It wasn't kind of the current mindset is we had slavery and all of our forefathers loved slavery and upheld it and protected it and all this kind of stuff. But we have to acknowledge, we have to understand that that's not necessarily the case. There are variations within our forefathers of what they thought about slavery, and the overwhelming majority of our forefathers wanted to get rid of the institution that had been around since the dawn of time. Okay, and it's you can't just put our current understanding of things on them. They were doing the best that they could during the time that they had, and they were making steps to get rid of slavery. And this type of a legal case was a huge step forward in that abolition movement. Okay, so, and I think we just have to understand that. We have to acknowledge that. Um, this is a factual piece. This is what we call a seminal document. It's one of those bedrock documents that really forms a foundation for things that happen after that. Because remember, once it's in the Supreme Court, then it establishes precedents and it becomes one of those documents that lawyers, as other cases come into being, lawyers go back to what is the precedent? How did we start this process? And this one affirmed inalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, um, and then just the legal standing of Africans that were taken illegally and they were able to go back. Okay, I'm rambling. I apologize, but I need you to kind of get the context of what this piece is. Let's get right into the StudySync Think questions for the first read. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and forth. I'm going to read the question here, and then I'll go to the other page, which has the answer, and we'll just kind of briefly go through the answer. Okay, so the first question here is, how does John Quincy Adams argue that principles in the Declaration of Independence overpower claims made by the victors in wartime. Support your answer with textual evidence. So he's acknowledging inalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, that's in there. And those principles override any kind of wartime victor over the subjects kind of mentality. Okay, so let's look at what the answer says in Study Sync. So this one says, I'm reading this first one here. Adams points out that the Declaration of Independence grants people inalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, which means that people do not have the power to enslave others. Pay attention to that answer because that's exactly what he's saying. It kind of goes back to what I was rambling about a little while ago. So this is John Quincy Adams. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. People do not have the power to enslave others. Okay, even through wartime, exploits and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so pay attention to that. All right, let's move into the second question. Again, pause and then come back and get the second question. Question 2 has a couple of different parts. Part A, what 3 key questions does Justice Joseph Story identify as the test to whether or not the enslaved passengers on the Amistad were subject to Pinckney's treaty in 1795? And part B, how do these questions relate to Adams' argument? Support your answer with evidence from the text. So the first part, 3 key questions to determine if they were subject to this treaty from 1795. Okay, so let's look at that part. Let me get my face down in the corner here. I don't need that up there. So Story asks these 3 questions. Do they qualify as merchandise? Remember, that was one of the arguments for slavery, that they were not humans, they were product, you know. So he's asking the question, do they qualify as merchandise? Number 2, are the passengers being rescued from pirates? Okay, so was this a situation where they were being taken from one land to another and pirates intercepted them and they were being rescued in that situation, which is part of the Pinckney document? And then 3, are Ruiz and Montez, those are the captains of the Amistad, are they the rightful owners of these slaves? Okay, so those 3 questions are valid in the argument. These questions do not relate closely to Adams' argument because his argument focuses on natural rights of individuals expressed in the Declaration of Independence, which he says are incompatible with rights of the victor to take life of his enemy in war. So again, you'll want to take a little bit of time, and anything that's in those colored pieces, that bluish color, whatever that is, that's straight from the text. So that would count as your textual evidence. All right, so go ahead and pause the video. I'm going to slide over to question 3. Okay, question 3. The natural rights of the property rights of individuals are 2 key aspects. Let me read that again. I read that wrong. The natural rights and property rights of individuals are 2 key aspects explored in the writings of the English Enlightenment and in the founding documents of the United States. How does Justice Story address these 2 aspects in his writing of the majority opinion of the court? How does this relate to Adams' argument? And what can you infer from his opinion about how courts in the United States apply the principles of natural rights? There's a lot in that answer there. Okay, so different parts. Make sure that you understand each one of them, and then I will show you the answer. The answer, according to StudySync, says that in paragraph 2, and this is in Stories, so the second piece, Story claims that if passengers were property, then they would have to be returned to their rightful owners according to the terms of that treaty. However, in paragraphs 3 and 4, he points out that the passengers were actually kidnapped and transported illegally. That's huge. So they were free citizens, which affirms their natural rights, not property. This relates to Adam's argument because it relates to natural rights expressed in the Declaration of Independence and argument of Adams. So it affirms what Adams is saying. We have the right as humans to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And whenever you're taken illegally, then that should stop, and you go back to your natural rights. You are or natural rights. You are not property in that case. Based on this, you can infer that the US courts restrain from applying natural rights absolutely. Rather, they should closely follow the law and apply natural rights as far as possible in unclear areas of the law. Kind of weird jargon there, but basically what that's saying is if it's unclear and you don't know how to figure out the facts that are in front of you, then you go back to natural rights. Okay. So whenever you're dealing with slaves being property or slaves being less than whatever, um, you affirm their natural rights if it's a case that is a little bit unclear. That's significant, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure you understand the changes that are happening within people during this period. If this didn't happen during this time period, we wouldn't be where we are today. Okay. So please understand that. Okay. Pause the video. I'm going to go to question 4. Question 4 says use context to determine the meaning of the word proprietor as it is used in the United States versus Amistad. Write your definition of proprietor here and tell how you found it. Okay, so the answer story says that all ships or merchandise recovered from pirates or robbers should be restored entire to the true proprietor. So I think proprietor means owner. So the true owner, the original owner of the property. So property owner is where that comes from. Okay. You could do a Google search and look at the different breakdowns of that word if you really wanted to. Okay, that's question 4. Go ahead and pause. I'm going to go to question 5. Question 5. The verb litigate means to make a situation the subject of a lawsuit. Adding the noun suffix ion creates the word litigation. What does litigation mean? And the answer, if the verb litigate means to make a situation the subject of a lawsuit, adding the suffix ion turns the word into a noun. So litigation means a legal action. Okay. Again, press pause. I'm going to go to 6. Okay, question 6. There is a video clip here of part of their conversation. If you choose, you can watch that video again so you can kind of refresh your mind. The question is, how does Rebecca use background information to qualify Olivia's assertion? Okay, so she's using what she knows to qualify, to make an understanding, to connect with what Olivia is saying. So the answer here, Rebecca points out that slavery was still legal in the United States at the time. So President Van Buren had political reasons for showing support for it. Okay. Understand it's a complicated mess during this time period. Legal precedent is established here. So there's open doors for getting rid of slavery. But there's also a long-standing practice. And most of the founding fathers still considered the practice of slavery to be evil. They called it a necessary evil. Some of our founding fathers decided to go complete abolitionist. Some of the founding fathers were kind of right in the middle where they treated their slaves fairly well. And then on their deathbeds, they actually freed their slaves. And then there were some who had a difficult time freeing the slaves at the time of their death, didn't put it in their will. Because they thought it was such an ingrained part of our culture that that act was not going to do anything for them. And there's also evidence, if you look at people like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and some of the others that actually kept their slaves throughout the whole thing, that they actually thought through the process and they're thinking, okay, if we free them and we have all of these slaves all over the South, then what do they have next? Where do they go? They don't have property. They don't have a situation where it's going to be good for them. So are they going to turn and revolt and cause an internal war, like a civil war, during those time periods? So it's better. The mindset was it's better for them to at least have a place to stay, food, work, all the different things, then free them and say, okay, you're out on your own, and just completely abandon them, because that would have been probably even more destructive for them. So anyway, that's a long extra rabbit trail for that one. Okay, so pause this video. Let's go to question 7. Question 7, again, you can watch that video clip to refresh your mind if you want to. How does Mike and Jeremy explain Adams's rebuttal of the counter argument? Okay, so they're talking about that counter argument, the pro-slavery side, and then Adams rebuts that. So what does Adams say? They quoted Adams' explanation to show that the principle mentioned in the counter argument has the opposite meaning of the Declaration of Independence. So if we have a bedrock understanding of what humanity is, inalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, then we have to stand on that principle. And that's what Adams is saying. The counter argument goes against those principles. And whenever the two are in conflict, we're going to stand on our principles. That's the beauty of early America, the American ideas that we have. Okay. Pause the video. I'm going to go to question 8. Question 8, we get into some of the conversation that we were having in a previous set of lessons. Remember the logos, ethos, pathos conversation that we had in our rhetoric discussion last week. How does Olivia identify pathos? And you can play that video to refresh your mind if you want to. The answer here, Olivia defines pathos with the phrase "unfortunate men," which appeals to emotion by making the court feel pity for the African. So there's that emotional appeal. They were unfortunate. They were taken. They rose up on the ship to take over the ship, but the captors continued to go to a whole different location. So whenever they landed on this land, they understood they were not in the place that they thought they were going. So there's unfortunate events after another, and then they're in this legal process. So it allowed the courts to feel pity for them. They were taken. They were on a foreign land. They just want to get home to go do what they used to be able to do. Okay, what I'm going to do now, because that video was probably just a little bit longer than I anticipated, which is not a problem. But what I'm going to do now, I'm going to stop this video, and I'm going to make a third video that's going to cover the skills for reason and evidence and for media. Okay, so see you in video 3.